Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Tort Institute's Wellbeing Week in Law Facebook Live Chat series. We're here today again with Kelly Tenney, and we are going to be discussing spiritual well-being. The report on the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing describes spiritual well-being as developing a sense of meaningfulness and purpose in all aspects of life. The experience of meaning and purpose can flow from everyday activities that align with our values and connect us with others, or from connecting with the eternal and transcendent. To start, let's even answer the first question. Can work be part of your spiritual journey?
I think not only can it be part of your spiritual journey, but I think it definitely should be part of your spiritual journey. When we talk about spiritual health and we talk about finding that meaning and purpose for why we are here and what we are meant to do, that absolutely should carry on in the work that we do and the daily tasks that we do. And I think, to your question, I think maybe there is a common misconception that those two don't need to be linked, or those two things don't need to be together. But I think that's why we often find so many people who are unsatisfied or unfulfilled in their jobs, because they don't have that sense of their spiritual wellness and they don't have that meaningful role, if you will, in their job. And I think that really leads to those high levels of, job unsatisfaction and potentially even high turnover when we're looking at employees.
How do we connect our work to our value system? We can't just pick any job that we want, but with the jobs that we have, how do we connect what we're doing to our own personal values?
One of the things that, I've learned both through personal and professional growth is that, part of having spiritual wellness and really being grounded spiritually, not just in work, but really in everything that you do, is to be able to set an intention. And so, if part of your core spiritual being is to live with a servant heart, I don't think it matters if you're in law or if you're a teacher or if you work at Target. I think that we can show up with the intention that every client that we meet, every customer, every person that we come into interaction with, we want to be there to serve, and to really just lead with that servant heart, for example. I think that, that paints a bigger picture of, how we can show up and be in alignment with our spiritual well-being, regardless of the kind of role that we're in. So intentions can be really powerful, in showing up in your work roles. And I think with those intentions, it doesn't really matter what role that you play, because you can still show up in that spiritual capacity.
How does a company's mission and values contribute to our spirituality? Or what are some types of mission statements and value statements that can help us discover whether or not this is a place spiritually we want to be at?
That's interesting that you say that, because, for many of you that don't know, my background's in health education. My master's is in curriculum and instruction. And then I'm fortunate enough to be a part of the Tort Institute team as director of operations. And one of my really, core values is educating. And that's obviously as a past teacher. And, that's something that's always been a part of what I find is my own purpose and, what I was meant to do. And with the Tort Institute mission and values, so much of it is about teaching. It's about educating. It's about collaborating and working together so that we have this, combined knowledge of how we can help our clients. And that is the spiritual connection that I find with our own mission and values here at MTI. And I think that the piece of that is really, let's be honest, like, how many of you watching have had a job and worked for a company that had mission and values, and maybe you haven't looked at them since you were onboarded, right? It's not something that typically we go back and revisit, but I think that's an important piece is really looking at the mission and the values. And I don't know that it's so much the mission and the values that companies put out themselves as much as it's how can we find a way to connect with our company's mission and values. So, how can you interpret your company's mission and values to be able to say, oh, this part really aligns with me spiritually, and find that connection, with whatever company it is that you may be working for.
What are some strategies for positive thinking in a high stress environment like mass torts?
I think that fits along well with your first question when you asked, how can we, connect our spiritual wellness in the workplace? And I think, I'm going to assume that most of us want to be positive, influential, supportive people, just in general, as part of who we are. And what you're talking about with the work negativity and things like that, I think the best thing that we can do for ourselves is really stay distanced from that. So, I often, we've all been in those jobs, and so many jobs, especially at firms and corporations, we talk about like the water cooler talk, all right? Like what are they talking about over there at the water cooler? And typically it's not positive. It's not the positive place where people talk about how happy they are and how much they love their, fellow coworkers. And I think personally, it's important to avoid places like that. If you know that in the break room, that's when some of the negativity occurs, go find someplace else to eat lunch. If you have a coworker that's particularly negative or, likes to vent, as we call it, right, in the workforce, maybe that time that you spend with that coworker is limited. I think it's hard enough to keep morale and positivity up, especially in a high stressful job. And I think the best thing that we can do is not feed into that by being around other people who are going to really magnify negativity in the workplace. We really want to find those people that are the more positive, more supportive people.
How can they handle incorporating more positive thinking and spirituality in the workplace, knowing the dynamics that you presented where, there may be areas or pockets of the office where negativity really thrives. Mm-hmm. People may have relationships outside the office where that negativity kind of thrive. How should bosses handle incorporating positive thinking and spirituality in the workplace, sort of break down some of those barriers that exist to true happiness when you're at work?
I think there's a couple really important things that bosses and other leaders can do for their employees and for the overall, company culture. And the first thing is be a good role model. If you want your staff to be positive and see the bright side of things and stay motivated and be in touch with, who they are spiritually and what they personally want to contribute to the role, the leaders in the companies need to show up in the same way. And, more often than not, if we have a boss or a leader that is negative, that brings the negativity to the team. And so, I'm always very mindful of who is on my team and who can be part of the conversations, because I really recognize that even one person can really bring down the morale of the team. So I think it's important for leaders to show up in the same way that they would love their staff to show up. The other thing I think that's important is to be a leader or a boss that gives the space for your employees to tap into their spiritual well-being and to be able to fulfill a role that is in alignment with who they want to be. I think when we have bosses that are micromanagers or where everything has to be the same way, I think even though I can see the systematic reason for why that may be, I think it really stifles people's ability to lean into their role as they see fit and be able to show up and contribute to their roles and responsibilities with their own part of their spirituality. And I think that it's important for employees to have the space to be able to do that and to add their own personal flair of how they want to do their job so that they can be in alignment, especially in law. If you have someone who wants to lead with the servant heart, they're probably going to be better at customer service. They're probably going to have, an increased client care. If you have someone who really is in alignment with positivity, they're probably going to be a potential leader in the firm or a bright light for other people. And I think we need to give employees the space to, bring those individual things to the table by really stepping away and not having that micromanaging system that always has to be in place.
I think that's great. That you brought up a great point about letting your employees align with their values in terms of the work they do. Like you said, some people's strengths may really be in communication with clients. And so they may spend a little bit more time on the phone, right, with the client, because that's just where their heart is. And they maybe don't want to end that conversation until they feel the person really is okay. Whereas you have someone else who may be much more focused on numbers and data, and they can spend, hours collecting data and analyzing data to help make business decisions. And both of those people are really sort of living their spiritual values and what's really important to them. But they're not necessarily having to do the same tasks, right? So it's allowing them to sort of be individuals, figure out what works best for them. And I know I can speak from personal experience, when you feel like you're aligned spiritually with your work, you're going to keep going, right? You're not necessarily looking at the clock. You're not, when can we take a break? And when you show up every day, you're leading with that spirit, not necessarily, well, what do I have to get done? And everyone around you knows it, and, they know sort of where your strengths are. So I think that's great. So
yeah, that's such a good point that you bring up. That makes me think about our team here at MTI. And, when you're allowed to just be in alignment, and, I recognize that there's probably a lot of, bosses out there and attorneys who are like, why would that think the spiritual talk is like woo woo. And it's like, why would does this mean I have to let them do yoga every morning and, whatever. And, where yes, that can be very beneficial. The point of that is when you give that space, and when every single employee is really feeling like they are living their purpose and adding meaning to their role, they're going to work harder. They're not going to want to take a break. They're going to be more excited when they're at work. I always look at our core team, and it's like, people are like, oh, you guys are all workhorses. And I don't believe it's that as much as we really love what we do. We really are passionate for what we're creating here at MTI. And I'm not mad if my computer's open at 8:30 at night and I'm still working, because it's obvious it's not a have to, it's an I get to. And I think allowing, employees to find that part, they'll start saying, I get to do this, instead of those, I have to do that. And that's an important piece in overall company culture.
Let's talk about a couple of practical things that we can do to help with our spirituality. I want to talk a little bit about meditation. So we've all are familiar with the term. Can you define what meditation is for us, and maybe talk a little bit about how Mass Tort professionals can get started in the practice of meditation?
So I think with meditation, again, like, I know we have this like cultural thought of meditation being like, this is what we're doing when we're meditating, but there's actually a lot of different types of meditation, which is interesting. And meditation really is just taking that mental, like having that mental alone time, if you will, right? It's really just allowing space for quiet. And a lot of people do sit and close their eyes and just have that quiet, but it doesn't always mean quiet, right? In meditation, actually, it's not all one size fits all. So for example, there's something that I've been studying a lot about, which is called movement meditation. where a lot of people find that peace and that quiet through movement, whether it's through yoga or it's through walking, or maybe it's through swimming, right? It's like it's running. I'm a big runner, and people are always like, how do you run? And I'm like, that's like my brain time. That's when I don't have a thought in my mind, and I'm just going, and my mind is finally clear. And so really, tips for like, how can one start meditating? The first thing I would do is I would identify like, what kind of environment do you like to be in, where you can recognize that you can really just let those thoughts go. And it might be sitting outside. It might be closing your eyes in silence. It might be listening to your favorite song, but it really is all about, where do you find that mental quiet space, and doing what feels right for you and not what you actually think it should be.
In addition to meditation, what are some other tips and strategies that we can use for dealing with burnout that makes us feel spiritually empty? What are some of the ways that we can replenish it within our workday?
I think journaling is a really great way to kind of reset. And it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can be something where it's a gratitude journal, where every time you're just feeling like, I'm feeling a little negative, or I'm feeling a little burnt out, maybe you go to your gratitude journal and you just write 3 things that you're grateful for. I think that's something that can be really simple. I think taking a mental break, like allowing yourself to unplug and just have quiet space for 5 minutes. I know you mentioned yesterday, going outside, but studies actually show that if you can put your feet into grass or water, it can be really grounding. And I would imagine no one's going out to the building water fountain and putting their feet in the water. But sometimes even like slipping off your shoes, going outside and putting your feet in the grass can be really grounding and rejuvenating. The other thing too is, if you have a favorite song that you just can't help but be happy when you hear it, or if you have someone who has a podcast or an influencer that always gets you motivated, listen to a quick YouTube video, or turn the podcast on or the song on to really just help you reset during those times, especially when you're at work.
For managers, bosses, law firm owners, why is it important for them to promote spirituality in the workplace? Not just support it, but really promote that aspect of well-being to their employees.
I think the most important piece is, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to have happier, healthier employees. You're going to see less negativity. You're going to see less stress. You're going to see less employee absences because they need to take a mental day. And you're going to have a lot of people that are just more focused on, doing their job, and like we mentioned, wanting to do your job, versus we've all had jobs that we didn't love. And those are definitely the jobs where I'm like, I think I need another break. I think I need to maybe walk to the bathroom again. I think I need, right? It's like you'll do anything to not have to do your work. But when you are promoting and supporting spiritual wellness, you have the employees that obviously are connected to their jobs for more than a paycheck. And you're going to see overall work productivity and satisfaction increase. And that, I think, is all the difference between a successful business and an unsuccessful business.
Right. And you, to sort of piggyback on what you said, particularly for, in mass tort, we are with clients for years sometimes, right? So we want people to stay on board, to stay engaged, to stay with a firm for a significant period of time, because that helps the business model, right? Clients don't like having to call, and every time they call, they're speaking to a new person, right? And why does that happen? Because people get burnt out. They don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel like they're aligned in their work and in their values. And so they leave, and it sort of becomes a recycling, of people coming in and out and in and out. And that ultimately affects the clients who were really here to help. So I think that's a great point that you made from a business perspective, because sometimes, like you said, people think of spirituality like, well, I'm paying for yoga and I'm paying for meditation and I'm paying for all this stuff that has nothing to do with the cases. But it really does, because ultimately the people who are delivering your client services, who are delivering the legal services to the client, speaking with them every day, working on their behalf, if they're not aligned, they're going to go. And that's going to affect, your bottom line and your productivity. So I think that's a very, very important point. Any other tips that you want to give the audience today about spirituality? I was thinking about things like taking nature walks, obviously things like yoga and meditation, just some, simple, low cost or free activities that we can do to make sure, like I said, when we feel spiritually empty, we have a way to sort of fill that cup back up so we can do our work.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things that people can do is unplug. I think that when we are tapped into our phones and media and things like that, it's energy sucking. It's easier to see negativity and to get caught up in things. And I think the best thing to do is to be able to shut it all down, if even for an hour, and just allow for that space, go back to, like you said, go back to doing nothing, which is like unheard of these days. But yeah, go outside and take a walk, or, read a book, or make a cup of tea and sit on your, sit in the favorite spot in your, on your couch. My family and I are really big on board games, where it's like, there's no TV, there's no tablets, mom and dad don't have their phones, and we just play a good old fashioned board game. And it really just helps you kind of just get back to the basics. And I think that's where you can rejuvenate, being, connected to your spirituality, is you really just have to allow for that quiet and to get back to just the basics of who you are and the simplicity of what life can be.
Thank you, everybody who's tuning in. We see some great conversation in the chat. This has been very, very beneficial. Kelly, thank you so much. Tomorrow, we will be talking about career and intellectual well-being, which is kind of a little different from the spiritual fulfillment in your job, but really the intellectual curiosity that we have in our work and why that's so important. So we hope that you guys will be with us tomorrow, again, 1:30 Central Standard Time, where we're going to talk career well-being. And then again, we'll be here for the rest of the week. And we hope to see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.